I'm Coach Trevor McGregor, also known as Coach T. And in today's episode, I'm going to share with you the 5 key reasons why people burn out and fail to scale in real estate. And once you hear 5 of these things and you take a personal inventory, you're going to be able to avoid some of the landmines that are out there so that you can get bigger and better and have more success, more wealth, and more freedom faster than you ever thought possible.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owners Association, where real estate investors have found success since 1968. I'm your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group. This episode is sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And RCB and Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com. Hello and welcome to episode 546. Most real estate investors who plateau aren't stuck because of the market. They're stuck because the habits and decisions that built their business to this point are now the exact ceiling, keeping them from what's next. My guest today is Trevor McGregor, a real estate investor with more than 2 decades in the business and a high-performance coach with over 45,000 one-on-one coaching sessions behind him. He works with entrepreneurs, executives, and investors who are already successful and ready to break through to the next level. In this conversation, we talk about the 5 things you must do to scale without burning out and the dark side of hitting your next level that almost nobody warns you about. Trevor, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me on, Brian. Excited to be here with you.
Tell us a little bit about your background and both how you started investing in real estate and then also became a coach.
Born and raised in Canada, and as a young Canadian, all I ever wanted to do was play hockey. And I had the speed and I had a really good game, but I didn't have the size to make the NHL, Brian. So I traded in my skates for textbooks, went to university and college, studied business, and then I went to work in the hospitality business for a corporation up in Canada that was a wonderful corporation that when I was 29 years old came to me and said, Trevor, we're expanding our locations. We'd love for you to join us as an investor. And I thought, wow, this is a great time for me to really, broaden my business skills and make some money. And so I took all of my savings, I cashed in my 401k, and I even convinced my own parents, who loved me at the time, to take out a 6-figure second mortgage on the family home. And I put it all into this expansion plan. And for the first couple of years, it went well until, to make a long story short, it imploded. And I lost all of that money. So there I was in my early 30s. I was broke. I gained a bunch of weight, and it caused a huge rift in my marriage. And I didn't know how I was going to pay back all of these loans. And so what do you do when you're down and out? Well, I found a coach. And this coach said, Trevor, what's happened to you is unfortunate. You're still a young man. You got to get up. You got to dust yourself off. And I said, that's great, but I don't know how I'm going to pay back these loans. And he said one thing that changed my life. He said, have you thought of investing in real estate? And I said, real estate? I don't know anything about real estate. And he said, well, even though you have no money, you can borrow other people's money and buy a property, fix it up, either refi it, rent it, sell it, and rinse and repeat. And my back was up against the wall, and I did exactly what he said to do because he was a successful real estate investor himself. I bought one little townhouse, fixed it up, took the equity out of that, and then I bought a duplex. And then I bought a 4-plex, and then I bought another 4-plex. And I just kept adding these little properties one at a time, slowly and methodically, to where in just 2.5 years, not only did I have enough money to pay back all of those failed loans, but I had a beautiful cash flowing portfolio on top of it. And that's when people started to come to me and say, Trevor, you're buying all these properties. How are you doing this? And I said, well, sit down, let's buy some lunch, and I'll go over my blueprint. And Brian, that's when the coaching bug bit, because I love showing other people how to get into real estate and all the different components, when it comes to looking for deals, underwriting deals, making offers on deals, getting bank loans, and then ultimately running the asset. And so as this coaching bug bit, that really became my, my happy place. And then, fast forward to today, in addition to having all those properties, we've gotten into, apartments across the U.S., self-storage across the U.S. We've done some land deals across the U.S. We bought some retreat centers in Costa Rica. And all of this has really been my passion, where people, business, and real estate comes together. And that's the story.
When people come to you and say, Trevor, how do I do what you're doing? And you sit down with this blueprint, tell us about that blueprint. Like, where does it start and where does it end up?
The blueprint starts upstairs, Brian. It starts with, your beliefs, because a lot of people are working in corporate and they want to get into real estate, or they want to buy property, or they want to get something where there's a second stream of income, but they're afraid to. There's so much doubt, there's fear, there's worry, there's anxiety, because this little, 3-pound mass between our ears says, this might not be safe. What if you lose money? What if you lose other people's money, right? What if people criticize you? And so people would rather just sit safe on the sidelines instead of getting into it. So the very first thing we often talk about is, what are your beliefs? What are your values? And what are your rules? Because oftentimes, we call it BVR. That's going to shape whether you are interested in getting into real estate or whether you're committed to getting into real estate. And that's really where the conversation starts.
Say that again. It will tell you whether you're
interested or committed, right? And if you're interested, you'll try it if it's convenient. But if you're committed, for the committed, there's always a way. And so I love working with people that might be interested, but I get them to committed. Or they might be committed and I get them to be defiantly committed, where not only do they want to buy 1 or 2 properties, but they want to go big. Does that make sense?
It does. And how can you really tell if someone is committed? What does that look like to you?
It really comes down to their why. Why do you want to get into real estate in the first place? Why do you want to make some extra money? Why do you want to raise a little bit of capital? Why do you want to be able to live a certain lifestyle? Because I found over the years, and after, working with and for Tony Robbins, because I became a Robbins coach back in 2012, it was always fascinating because Tony would send me these professionals that wanted to get into real estate, but they didn't have a big, fat, compelling reason why they wanted it. So as we dig deep and we really went underneath the first level of the why, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, once you really understand what's underneath all of that, it's pretty clear to see who's interested and who's committed, because it's got to be about more than just the money. It's got to be about, you want to create places for people to live. Perhaps you want to better communities. Perhaps you want to be able to pass down some property to your kids or your grandkids in terms of building some sort of generational wealth. So I found that when the people had a bigger why, they were both feet in and committed and ready to go.
Obviously, your why in the beginning was you had some loans to pay off, but you built a bigger portfolio even after you paid off those loans. So what was your why in continuing?
I think my why has always been of contribution. If we really go back, I've always been the captain of the hockey team. My grandmother owned a general store in small town, little rural town in Alberta, Canada. And I would watch her as kind of like that, spirit for the community to come in, and they'd buy their bread and buy their milk and get their, their chocolate bars and all that stuff. And I really watched how, she poured into people. And it wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the almighty dollar. It was about, doing the right thing. And I think as we take a look at real estate across America, whether, the properties we have are in Dallas or Florida or the Carolinas or Nashville or wherever, you know what? We're really making these, sparkle. We're, rebranding them, doing new signage, creating new playgrounds, creating new pools, creating new dog parks, improving the communities, reducing crime. And so when you think about it, we might get into real estate just for the money, but it's really, what's the ripple effect? What are you doing to better these people's opportunities, their lives, the places they're going to spend their Christmases, their New Year's, their birthdays, their 4th of July. And so when you really zoom out and get a bigger picture, it all boils down to contribution.
Part of the reason I wanted to have you on the show is about breaking through to the next level. And I'm hearing you say there's been multiple levels you've been at. You had a job and you got into an investment with your, it seems like you got into an investment with your employer, and that's what created all these loans. But then you decided, hey, I'm going to step to the next level, which is real estate investing. But then it's like, no, now I'm going to do multi-units. Now you're doing apartments across the United States. So every level you had to kind of look at where you've been and then figure out where you're going. And there's a process there. And I'd like you to take us through that process of like, what got you here is not necessarily going to get you to the next level. So how do you approach that?
This is the bread and butter where once we really get into it, there's only 5 key reasons why people fail to scale or 5 key reasons why people burn out in the process of wanting to grow. And as you really get intimate, and after doing, again, 45,000 coaching sessions, you'll hear my voice is raspy because I'm on Zoom or the phone every day and have been for 2 decades. And it's my passion. I'm not complaining about it. I absolutely love it. But really, once you start to identify that 1 or 2 of these things could hold you back from growing, that's when you start to see it through a whole new lens. And so we'll kick it off with the first of the 5, which again comes back to limiting beliefs. If you think that you can only invest in your backyard and you could never invest in another state, we need to talk about that. If you think that you're only good for a short-term rental, yet on your heart you want to buy a 12-plex, we can talk about that. If you really want to get into self-storage, assisted living, mobile home parks, there's different asset classes out there. So what we do, first of all, is if you really do want to scale and grow, we've got to really open up that beautiful brain of yours and ask quality questions and start taking an inventory of what do you really, really want? Why do you want it? And what's going to prevent you from having it? Because as a high performance coach, if we can ask that question, what prevents, and then we start to, move that out of the way, we start to see a new path and a new way of thinking and behaving that can ultimately get you to where you want to go. So the first of the 5 is if you want to scale and you don't want to do it with burnout, you need to start working on those limiting beliefs. Does that resonate with you?
It does. And I've had coaching throughout the years, and sometimes I wish I trusted my limiting beliefs because I might be pushed into doing something that doesn't work out. And then I'm like, well, damn, that's kind of what I thought would happen in the first place. What do you say to that?
It's a fair comment because ultimately there's this thing that I teach and it's called the law of polarity. And the law of polarity is a law. It's just like the law of gravity. If you jump off the roof of your house, you're going to go down. And the law of polarity says you can't have a really good real estate deal or a really good experience without the polar opposite also being possible, where perhaps you bit off more than you can chew. Perhaps you went into the wrong market. Perhaps your timing was wrong. There's this old adage where Tony Robbins used to say, you can do the right thing at the wrong time and lose, but you could also do the right thing at the right time and win. So if you're going to play in the game of real estate and you're going to put on your entrepreneurial hat, you know what? There are no guarantees in real estate. There is risk, but ultimately, if you do the right things in the right order, at the right times and with the right people, the potential for success is greater. But if you don't get in the ring or don't get in the game, you can never do real estate.
What are some of the other steps that you take people through?
If we go to number 2, this is where now we start to get tactical, because number 2 is really what causes people to fail or what causes them to burn out is really what I call a lack of a strategic plan, right? And most people spend more time planning their summer holiday to Mexico than they do their business or their life. So we take a look at where somebody is and we take a look at where they want to go, but we do it in 3 stages. We talk about the very first part, which is the short term. Short term might be in the next year. Long term is really the next year to say 5 or 7 years. And then when we really zoom out to, beyond that, the vision that you have might be 10 years, 15 years, or 20 years. And so when we know where you're at and we know where you want to go in the short term, the long term, and the vision you have, now we can start to reverse engineer what are those steps that are going to get you moving in that direction. Do we need to choose an asset class? Do we need to choose a couple of markets? Do we need to take a look at partnerships? Are you going to do it alone? Right? Ultimately, are you using your money? Or are you going to use a bank's money? Are you going to raise capital? So really, that all becomes part of the plan. And once you start putting one foot in front of the other and you start taking action, that's when sparks fly and magic happens. But again, you want to really be diligent about getting rid of, number 1, those limiting beliefs, and then number 2, sitting down and getting clear on where you want to go.
It's difficult for me to figure out, where do I want to go? Is it a certain amount that I want to make each month? Is it a certain number of properties? And it's often it seems arbitrary to me, like me just kind of picking a number out of a hat, what I want.
You don't have to just pick a number out of a hat, but let's say you wanted to get into real estate and you wanted to buy something in your local neighborhood. That's a goal. That's an outcome. Maybe you don't want to buy in your local neighborhood. Maybe you want to invest in the Carolinas or Florida, right? Maybe you want to do it with a group that's already operating. Maybe you want to start something on your own. So again, there's so many unknowns that we've got to start getting crystal clear again on what you don't want, because when you get clear on what you don't want, it starts to reveal what you do want, right? And again, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. And sometimes what's really fascinating with my clients is all we need to do is get them moving up steps 1 and 2, Brian, because after steps 1 and 2, steps 3 and 4 become revealed, right? And then we step up 3 and 4, and then 5 and 6 show up. And then at that time, the universe starts to bring you the right brokers, the right lenders, the right insurance people, the right landscapers, the right people to, support the renos that you're doing. Because there are other people out there that when you think of you going out there and doing a real estate deal, the ripple effect on all of the sub trades and all of the landscapers and the roofers and the plumbers and all of that are tremendous. And they're out there. So if you really take those first few steps and you find what I call the right professional pillars, there's no question that you can keep going because you're going to learn along the way, and it won't be in a straight line. Sometimes it's like a roller coaster. You go up, you go down, there's a loop-de-loop. You think you're going to fall out, but then the universe has a sly way of getting you back on track. And it reminds me of that old quote from Think and Grow Rich, where Napoleon Hill said that there is no failure, there's only feedback. And I love that quote. There is no failure, there's only feedback. And as real estate investors, and I've been investing for 2 decades, we get a lot of feedback, don't we?
Oh, yeah, every day.
You betcha.
Every day there's feedback.
I'd like to take a moment to tell you about Green Property Management. Not only do they manage everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area, they also manage my entire portfolio. So I can tell you from personal experience that their unique flat fee management style is worth a closer look. If you feel that your property isn't operating to its fullest potential, then Green Property Management can help you take a holistic approach that will save you money, eliminate your headaches, and increase your net income. And if you're a property manager interested in applying Green Property Management's model, give them a call at 1-866-95-GREEN or visit them on the web at greenpropertymgt.com.
If you're thinking of leaving your W-2 job and becoming a full-time real estate investor, one of the greatest costs you must consider is healthcare for you and your family. When I made this transition myself, I found the whole healthcare insurance process to be confusing and frustrating. That's why I'm glad I met Chad Creasy at RCB and Associates. Chad is a professional health insurance agent who helps real estate investors and small business owners understand and choose their best healthcare options. And best of all, his services are covered by the insurance company and won't cost you a dime. If you live in Michigan and are expecting a change in your healthcare insurance coverage for any reason, or losing employer coverage or transitioning into Medicare, then you owe it to yourself to contact Chad Creasy at rcbassociatesllc.com. Did you just reveal steps 3 and 4 then, finding that team and putting the pieces together, or is there more to it?
You're getting close to it, Brian, because step 3 is really what I call a lack of systems for support. A lack of systems for support. So again, we got to work on those limiting beliefs. We got to create the plan. But really, step 3 is where you create robust systems that help you to expand what it is you're doing. So that might be SOPs, that might be people, that might be leveraging AI, that might be finding the right, what we call who's or super who's, right? And a who is somebody that can help you build your real estate empire, but a super who is worth 10 who's. So ultimately, as you go out there and you've got your limiting beliefs, you got your plan, you got your systems starting to rock, it really is the trifecta to get things moving. How does that land with you?
Yeah, I think that the who's and the super who's are so important. I mean, those are the catalysts that really take you to the next level. And if you don't find those people, you won't get to the next level. You
can't do it on your own. It's an asset class, again, of single family, multifamily, mobile home parks, assisted living, self-storage. I mean, I've got clients in 37 different US states currently doing something in real estate, but they're certainly not doing it on their own. They've got systems and processes. They've got the right who's, the right super who's, and now they're really starting to learn how to leverage AI to be part of that number 3 called systems.
Talk about number 4.
Number 4, Brian, is my favorite topic, and it's something I just simply refer to as poor time management. Poor time management, because we've all got 168 hours a week. Now we sleep for some of those hours, we eat, we pay the bills, we play with the kids, but really, what are you doing with your real estate hours? And are you working on what's urgent all the time, or are you working on what's important? And I find people, unfortunately, make everything urgent, and they're always putting out fires and always jumping from thing to thing instead of sitting down and planning out their week, or sitting down and planning out their 2 weeks or their month or their quarter. And ultimately, we want to remember that working on what's important is going to move you forward, because that's growth. and working on what's urgent is more maintenance or putting out fires or doing that. And you have to do both, right? As real estate investors, you know as well as I do, we wear many hats. But ultimately, I can tell where somebody's going to be 6 months or a year down the road by where they spend their time.
Trevor, how do you manage it then to focus on what's important and not just what's urgent?
I carve out time and I protect that time as if it was, dependent upon my life. Because there's always going to be fires. There's always going to be, things that are going on with the wife or the kids or something with your aging parents or something with, sports. And, we're all here on purpose and with purpose to enjoy a certain quality of life. But I find that, again, if we go back and use those words, interested versus committed, interested people, kind of, if you look at their calendar, it's a hodgepodge, but committed people will carve out an hour here, 90 minutes here, and they'll protect that time to do something that's growth-oriented rather than maintenance-oriented. Maybe looking at new markets, speaking to new brokers, looking at new ways to raise capital, whatever it is. And again, those are the people that oftentimes, like my client, Joe Fairless, win the game of real estate and the game of life. I mean, I don't know if you know Joe, but he's probably my most famous client, where when I met Joe, he owned 4 single-family homes in Texas, right? 4 single-family homes in Texas. Fast forward to today, Joe has $2.7 billion in AUM. And I got a front row seat to all of it as his coach because I coached him for over a decade. So that didn't happen overnight, but it happened because we got rid of his limiting beliefs. We created a plan. We created systems to support the plan, and we optimized his calendar for success. How does that all land with you?
Yeah, Joe's been on the show, and I know that he's got a huge portfolio. What I'm curious about, and I want to dig a little deeper in, is what does it mean to carve out time? What does it mean to optimize that? Like, what tools are you using? Like Slack, Asana, time blocking? What specifically do you recommend?
So those are all good tools, the ones that you've spit out, but it's really about carving out the time and protecting it so that when your phone rings, you don't answer it. Right? If I set a Pomodoro, which is basically just a timer on my smartphone, and I set that timer for 45 minutes, let's say I block a time for 45, I'll do deep work in that 45 minutes where I'm heads down doing something on my laptop, right? I'm not talking to brokers. I'm not talking to investors. I'm not talking to property managers. I'm focused on something using one of the systems. It might be Asana. It might be Slack. It could be a CRM. It might be an Excel spreadsheet. But I'm doing deep focused work because I'll tell you this, most people are looking at what emails coming in. There's a notification on their phone. They're surfing Facebook. They're checking out X or Twitter. And that's really where they're losing time, because I don't know if you know the statistic that for every time we're interrupted, Brian, it takes the human brain 7 to 12 minutes to get back to the level of focus we had before we were interrupted. So think of how people sit down at their desk and they're multitasking and they got 10 things going on. I don't do that. I carve out 45-minute Pomodoros or time blocks. And then when my timer goes off, I get up, I go refill my water cup, I use the restroom, and I come back and I'll probably do a double Pomodoro. So now I've got a full 90 minutes of deep work. And if I do 90 minutes of, uninterrupted time, it's almost worth 4 to 5 hours of doing, something where you do get interrupted. And so that's how I'm able to really run my real estate portfolio. I'm married. I have 3 kids. I do a lot of coaching, a lot of consulting, a lot of speaking. But again, I figured it out because, I've been on this planet for 50 years. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I've also seen what doesn't work. And that's where time gets away on people, or you hear people say, I wish there were 8 days in a week, or I don't have enough time, Trevor, you just don't understand. Well, I do understand because I've got a very busy schedule.
And then there's one more step.
It comes down to number 5. So again, number 1, limiting beliefs, we got to get rid of them. Number 2, create the strategic plan. Number 3, systems to support the plan. Number 4, optimize your calendar and your time management. And then 5, Brian, comes down to execution, right? You got to go out there and take what I call intelligent and inspired action. I'll say it again, intelligent and inspired action, where intelligent means smart and inspired means not because you have to, but because you get to. And once you take action, then you want to measure, are you on track or are you off track? What are your benchmarks? What are your KPIs? What are you measuring against? And then really, where I come in as a coach is holding you accountable to all of it. Because there's not one real estate client that I've ever worked with that I didn't have them do those 5 things. And it's not a one-time thing. You refine it over and over and over and over as you grow, kind of like Joe Fairless has had to, because even when you go from 4 single-family homes to 2.7 billion, it doesn't happen in a straight line. There's lots of wins. There's lots of challenges. There's lots of, ups and downs. But again, for the committed, just like I had to when I was in my early 30s, you got to get up, you got to dust yourself off, and you got to keep on keeping on. But those 5 things are really what I feel after doing, again, 45,000 sessions, being a real estate investor for 2 decades, working for Tony Robbins, and going to a ton of real estate, conferences and seminars. Those 5 things that if the listener takes a personal inventory and says, all right, on a scale of 1 to 10, truly, where are my limiting beliefs at? Where's my plan? Where are my systems at? How's my time management? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And then am I executing and measuring the progress and having somebody keep me accountable? Those things can really help somebody turn what I call decades into days. It shouldn't take 10 years to build a portfolio if you could do it in 5 or 3. And that doesn't mean rush it, because again, I'm not about, rushing it, but I also believe, that success leaves clues. And when we look at your journey, we look at my journey, we look at Joe Fairless's journey, and I've coached tens of thousands of other people. I mean, I'd have to be an idiot at this stage, Brian, to know what holds people back and, what allows them to explode their results and go forward. So those 5 things, I invite the listener to take a personal inventory of.
What does executing look like and taking action? Because my sense is that that's where most people get stuck, or a lot of people get stuck, because they put all the systems in place, they've had all the conversations, but then they just don't know what to do with all of that and how to turn it into progress and success. And why is that? And how do you overcome that? And what does it actually look like to take action?
Such a great question. And you're giving the listener a gift now, Brian, because ultimately we do what's called a values hierarchy. And we also do something called a ZOG hierarchy. So I'll start with the first one, where the values are, we've got to get crystal clear on what our next logical step is. Are we going out there to look for deals? And if you're going to look for deals, you got to talk to brokers. You got to drive neighborhoods. You've got to get your finger on the pulse of what's happening in the market, right? Maybe they're optimizing for raising capital because they've got a deal. So we talk about that being their highest value, where we're going to go work on that. Maybe they've got to, execute and run an asset. So we're going to talk about that. But if you don't know what your top 3 to 5, values are in a week, and you're just getting up on Monday morning and going after it, that's what average investors do. And if you're listening to this show, you're not average, right? You're ready for, some sort of cadence to what you should be working on based on, what's in front of you. Over here is what I call your ZOG hierarchy. So that's ZOG, which really stands for your zone of genius, right? We've all got things that we'd rather do and that we're good at rather than some of the stuff that's lower down. For me, I love looking for deals. I love talking to brokers. I love raising capital. But when it comes to running the asset, that's further down the list. I've already done that for a long time. I don't want to do that anymore. I want to, farm that out or assign that out to a great property manager, right? So when I look at my zone of genius is talking to brokers, underwriting, raising capital, everything else that falls below that is what I call the floor. And so with my zone of genius, I stay above the floor. So now I go back and I look at my hierarchy over here with what are all the things I could or should be doing. Over here, what's my zone of genius and what's not, where I can farm that out to someone else on my team or a partner or someone else. That's when I find that if we're working in our zone of genius and we know what we should be working on and we execute it, that's when sparks fly and magic starts to happen.
I want to make sure I ask you about the dark side of getting to that next level, because that's something you talk about as well. Like you get to that next level, you think it's all going to be better and great, but sometimes it's not. Why is that? And what does that sometimes look like?
Again, it's different strokes for different folks. Some people have this unbelievable desire to want to get to a certain net worth, or they want to get to a certain amount of cash flow, or they want to get to a certain thing where it's a tall order for some people. And yet that dream is still alive. And when they go up the mountain, right, there's bears and rocks and trees, and it gets really hard to climb that mountain where maybe they're not meant to go out there and achieve exactly what they thought they were. Maybe their mountain is smaller. Maybe their mountain's bigger. And that's where I think that we do a disservice by, comparing how much, real estate we have to our neighbor or to our fellow investor, where, not everyone needs to make $1 billion or have $1 billion in AUM. It's really, what are you optimizing for? Like for myself, I'm optimizing for freedom. I want financial freedom. I want time freedom. I want location freedom. I want to be able to do my work and impact humanity. And then ultimately, I want to meet great people like you and other people that are playing the game at a higher level. So I know that since I'm optimizing for those things, I know what number I need. I know how much time I want to work a week. I know that I want to travel and not have to be, settling for working in one specific place all the time. And so I'm able to really adjust my life and my wife and my kids' lives to where, again, after being on the planet for 50 years and really being broken upside down tremendously in my early 30s, I figured out a new pathway to really optimize for what I want. So it's not me beating on my chest because it took a long time to get to this place. But what about you? What about the listener? What are their dreams? What do they want? Why do they want it? And how much is really enough? Because I've got clients that come to me and say, look, I want to make so much money in real estate that I can buy an NBA basketball team. I'll say, is that really what you want? Is that really what you want? Well, not really. I just want to make enough money to take care of my wife, my kids, have a house, have a second house, and travel. So again, I'll throw it over to you, but there's where we got to go back to the why. And the why has to be specific. It's got to be measurable. It's got to be attainable. And then ultimately you got to ask, are you interested in achieving it, or are you committed to achieving it?
Tell our listeners how they can find out more about you or get a hold of you, and feel free to, share whatever information you'd like to share.
Well, thank you again for having me on. I think that this has been a kind of a masterclass in, exactly what people need to do if they really want to scale in real estate. And the best way to find me is over on my website, which is trevormcgregor.com. That's TrevorMcGregor.com. And there you can find out a little bit more about me and how my coaching structure works. And for anyone that wants to do a 30-minute discovery call, I offer those free of charge. And I also have a team of coaches underneath me. I've got 5 fabulous coaches across the US that help me and help, other investors go from where they are to where they want to be. And I've also got a special gift for you and the listener, where if you go to trevormcgregor.com/real estate, that's trevormcgregor.com/real estate, you can literally get my Rich Beyond Belief mini audio series. And my Rich Beyond Belief mini audio series, Brian, is 8 mini coaching sessions for real estate investors that are defiantly committed to going to the next level. And I'm offering it free of charge. It's the same frameworks I use with a lot of my high-paying clients, but ultimately you or the listener can go grab that. And once you download it, it'll be on your desktop or on your smartphone, and you can start listening right away.
How are you using AI today in your business?
Again, it's absolutely phenomenal to have dipped my toe into AI a couple of years ago. And it is changing so quickly that I am still, my head is spinning with all of the new things that you can do. When you start moving from ChatGPT to, Gemini to Claude, all of these things. So it's really about systems, processes, communications, so many different things, just organization, using it as a little bit of a marketing engine as well. Those are some of the simple things that we're using it for right now. But boy, is it ever going to change in the next 2, 3, 5 years. It's going to become a major part, of what all of us will need to either, learn or definitely delegate to someone who's on our team so that they can execute with those tools as well.
Trevor, thanks for coming on the show today and kind of sharing that 5-step process that you take your clients through to help break through to that next level, and then kind of what to expect once you do get to that next level, and making sure you really understand what your why is. This has been a very valuable conversation, and I appreciate you having it with us.
So much great gratitude to you, Brian, for having me on the show. I hope the listener doesn't just, listen to that. I hope they go and apply it and, really lean into it, because I do believe that real estate is a vehicle for growth. and I believe it's the greatest wealth vehicle on the planet. So thanks for having me on.
I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode. I'm your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group, and you can find out more about me by going to higinvestor.com. That's higinvestor.com. This episode was sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com.
And RCB and Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com.
You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.